Brady, I've known Brady since he was a kid. He's probably embarrassed for me to say this repeatedly, but he always just stood out as being really a polymath, just an amazing Renaissance boy, and now a Renaissance man. He's a, you'd see him walking around with books on relativity and advanced mathematics and things like that. So he's really pretty amazing that way. And the other time I remember is when we first started doing the Orca Bowl is the high school. And Brady pretty much dominated the field. In fact, he was so good at it that he would ring the bell before he would actually, before the judges actually finished the sentence. So he really helped bring home the trophy that year. Well, Brady's an amazing guy, and I think whatever he talks about is fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to him talking about salt. So I'm going to turn it over to him. Again, I'm going to mute myself, and I'm going to turn off my video. I suggest you go to speaker view, and then we'll do Q&A after his presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Boyd. And I'm just going to start sharing my screen here. And I am outside the library, y'all. So if the connection is a bit fuzzy at times, just blame the library. Don't blame me. So I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to, okay. Now, wonderful. And Boyd, do unmute yourself and tell me if something's going wrong, because when I'm in this presentation, I can't see any of you and I can't hear any of you if you're all muted. So yeah, do feel free to pop in and yell at me if I've just become completely unintelligible or speaking too fast, of course, anything else like that. So yeah, good man. Thank you, Boyd. Okay. Thank you so much for coming. It truly is an honor. I love talking about what I get to do for a living. It's where I get to live. I mean, we all get to live in this beautiful place, and I get to do a pretty darn special thing here. And I love chatting about it. So it's a real honor to be here with you all tonight. And yeah, just love this picture of one of the most beautiful spots in the world, as far as I'm concerned. And leads me to my first point, which is basically this word wonder. We kind of lose sight of this idea as adults. When we're around kids, they're kind of more or less constantly in a state of that, or not constantly, but maybe 50% of their time is spent in a state of wonder. And as adults, we say things are wonderful, but we kind of don't really, it's kind of a hollowed out meaning, like basically just means things are good. But how often do we actually spend in a state of wonder? Like, wow, we see something that kind of moves us, maybe moves our mind, maybe it moves our spirit. But I guess my point is one of the wonderful things about my job is it's kind of simple, but I actually do get to experience wonder on a pretty regular basis. And this next picture will kind of give you a little sense for why. This is a picture. It's quite bright, so you might have to zoom in. And I don't know if you can zoom in, but this is a picture of one of our salt ponds. And we'll get into the details of how we do what we do and all the rest. But I just wanted to start with this because it's images like this that just, they fill me with wonder. I mean, look at this. It's like, there's so much going on. And from these pyramids, so that what you're looking at is maybe 2 or 3 inches of water with all sorts of crystals growing inside of it, hanging on the surface of the water. And I don't know, I just feel really lucky to get to see things like this at work. In one sense, we're a business that makes sea salt, and we sell sea salt, and we sell it in jars, and widget. We're trying to make money, but the core thing that we produce is this kind of miraculous thing that it blows my mind every time it happens. And yeah, I just wanted to start with that it's pretty unique to have a job that, it gives me regular hits of wonder, and I'm very thankful for that. So what am I going to talk about tonight? Yeah, so give you a little backstory about how I got into making salt and why, upon more reflection, there's a decent chance I was probably destined for this. If people knew me and knew what I was about in high school, they'd probably been like, I don't know what they would have thought I would have done, but it probably wouldn't have been salt farmer. But the more I've been in this for about 9 years now, the more I've come to think about it, I think I probably was destined for this. It was kind of built for me as a career. So we'll go into that a little bit. We'll go into, of course, how we make our sea salt, with a little bit of salt science thrown in. And chemistry was a real challenging topic for me. So we're not going to, don't hold me to my chemical knowledge too much. And we're going to go into what the future looks like for our business, what my dream is, because, if you're not aiming at something, if you're not imagining something beyond where you're at right now, then, you're basically just, the way I say it is, you're basically just a ball of habits and responsibilities. And that's certainly a part of business. That's part of life is habits and responsibilities. But, it's important to try to take a step back and say, what is it that I'm trying to accomplish with this and where are we going? And I'll just kind of give you the elevator pitch for what my dream for all this is. I'll share what I've learned about business and learned about life being a salt farmer. So, the salt farmers aren't known for their wisdom. So take everything I say with a lot of grains of salt, not just one. And I really do want to I want to make sure I bring emphasis to what I'm still curious about, what I'm still lacking knowledge on in this business and in this endeavor. Because the thing is, when you give a presentation, it can be so easy to fall into the role of the expert. And, relative to y'all, I am an expert on salt making, but, in the absolute sense, my ignorance is just so greatly outweighs my knowledge that, it doesn't mean much. So what I'm trying to do is avoid the trap of feeling like I'm an expert and kind of keep honing in on things that I still am really unclear about, because that's really what life's all about, is the stuff that we don't know and engaging with that. And so I'll mention a few things I'm still curious about in terms of this business. And then, of course, we'll get to your questions. So, and we're moving on. Who am I, and was I born to be a salt farmer? Well, as you may know or may not know, if you haven't seen me growing up here, I was born and raised here in Friday Harbor. I'm about 34 years old, and I consider being born and raised here the greatest blessing of my life. I mean, it's just been an incredible place to me from day one, and this community has just supported me in every single way. So that's certainly a part of what's gone on into this business. Because in theory, I could have started a business anywhere, right? But I really couldn't have, because I couldn't imagine doing a business anywhere, and I couldn't imagine really living anywhere now, because I'm raising my kids here now. And to me, this island life that we all share, is just basically one of the most magical things I got going on. And so, like I mentioned at the beginning, it's a bit odd, this idea of being a salt farmer, because there's not many salt farmers. There's big, huge salt producers like Morton Salt or, Cargill, or there's like salt conglomerates. But until the last 5-10 years, really, there was a large span of time when there was no such thing as like a small scale salt producer. So it's kind of an anomaly in the world. Has it gone? You can find small vegetable farms, for instance, but, small salt farms weren't really a thing until about 10, 15 years ago, with the renaissance of, local food, slow food, all those other things that we've been, that have been percolating through our society. Small scale salt production kind of came back. But regardless, it's kind of an odd career choice. I went to school at University of Washington for mathematics, and certainly didn't learn a single drop about salt, not one. I mean, I don't know if I even said the word salt once when I was my whole 5-6 years at University of Washington. But what I did do was I found a spark at the botany greenhouse. They had a beautiful botany greenhouse down there, and a student farm, the tiny student farm that was run down there. And it gave me a spark for something that was beyond what I thought I loved, which was, math and science and that kind of stuff, and for farming. And I think that the spark has always been a part of me, because, growing up on the islands, agriculture is kind of always around you. Even if you're not part of it, it's kind of in your blood a little bit. And I remember going to University of Washington in my junior year, maybe my senior year of high school, and they asked, like, it's an orientation. You're not even in the school yet. It's just for a tour. And they asked everybody, what do you want to study here? And, my thing was always to be a little bit weird. I enjoy saying answers that people don't expect. But it felt true at the time. So I raised my hand, and when it came to my turn, I said, I want to be an orchardist. I want to study orchards. And everybody laughed. And they're like, you're at the wrong school. You got to go to Pullman for that. But, sometimes the things you blurt out in a moment's, without a moment's thought, sometimes reflect much more true elements of your personality than you can find by reasoning into it. All that being said, what I've come to realize is that salt farming kind of brings in so many different parts of my personality that I never thought I could bring together. It allows me as a business owner to be really still engaged with mathematics, because, I'm constantly working on my spreadsheets and working on my numbers and trying to understand, which products are profitable, which aren't, and how much money it's worth investing. It allows me to be involved with science because, as I'll go into a little bit with our production process, there's a lot of science that goes into it. It kind of like, it's miraculous, but it's also a ton of science. And it allows me to be a farmer. Like the core elements of our work are like hauling seawater, putting it in big greenhouses, scooping it up, and it feels like you're a medieval farmer. You're like using your back, your body, you're sweating, you're out in the sun. And it allows me to live on the island and share the love of this place, this San Juan Island, this magical island that I grew up on. And you can see on my hat there, our logo, and that's that island there as the L, so SA Island T or SALT. And it allows me to share with the world this place that I love. So, the more I think about it, I can't imagine doing anything other than being a salt farmer, because it brings in so many different parts of who I am. And I just feel incredibly grateful to have a career that, however odd it might be, it seems to be kind of like a holistic mashup of a lot of different parts of me. I mean, it's certainly not everything, not all the parts of me, but it does a lot. I mean, and also if you look at this picture, Islanders are kind of weird. We love swimming in cold water. We're like, have this kind of spiritual bond with the ocean. Yeah, so I get to pull cold seawater out and make salt from it. It seems just about perfect for somebody who spent countless hours swimming in the cold ocean as a kid, to the point where I have surfer's ear because I got too much cold water in my ear. So anyway, that all being said, I just feel like somehow life worked out and presented me with this career that works quite well. So how did this all get started? So this is my best friend on earth, Elliot Thompson. He grew up here as well. His mom, Marty, still works here at the library. This is him about, I'd say 2007 or 8 or so. So we were both in college. He was in San Diego. I was in University of Washington. And like I said, I'd kind of gotten into, towards the end of college, I'd kind of gotten into the idea of farming and agriculture and local food. And, when you encounter a new idea, it kind of grabs hold of you. And so I had read a magazine article about a couple who was doing a local Thanksgiving, within 100 miles. All their food for their Thanksgiving was going to come within 100 miles. And that included sea salt. And they described going down to the ocean and, picking up some water and bringing it home and boiling it. And so I was like, oh man, that sounds amazing. I got to try that out. So when Elliot came home for Christmas, we were like, okay, let's do it. So this is probably December, right around Christmas. And that's him out there with an igloo cooler at South Beach. And, big waves, terrible weather. He's in his jacket, his snowsuit. And so we got, filled up that igloo cooler. He took some back to his house. I took some back to my house. And we boiled the seawater. And it's just an absolute godforsaken mess. I mean, don't ever boil seawater in your house. I'm going to save you the trouble. It just puts salty steam everywhere. It coats everything in the kitchen with salt. It just makes an absolute mess. It takes 3 or 4 hours, and you get a tiny little bit of wet, kind of clumpy salt. But I don't know, that experience of seeing the first crystals form out of what was perfectly clean seawater, perfectly clear seawater, it stuck with me. It's hard to have it not stick with you. It kind of is like magic, it's, where do those come from? They just kind of appear as if from nowhere. It's like, or like watching a seed grow into a plant. It's like, in some sense, it's the most mundane thing, and in another sense, it's the most amazing thing. So that experience stuck with me. And right after college, I went to work on a vegetable farm near Seattle, trying to get my chops in the dirt that way. And a big part of vegetable farming, at least in this environment, is greenhouses. Because it's really hard to grow a tomato outdoors here. You can do it, but you're going to have a lot less tomatoes. It's really hard to grow a lot of things that really don't love being in the Pacific Northwest. But when you add a layer of greenhouse film, it's like all of a sudden you can do it. And I knew that sea salt all around the world was made by just sunshine and seawater. Like the sun evaporates the seawater and leaves salt. And I was like, okay, is there some way that I can bring in what I know about greenhouses to make this happen? And long story short, it was a thought in the back of my head. It wasn't like a plan. It wasn't a business. It wasn't anything. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, showed me a YouTube video of a gentleman in Maine. His business is called Maine Sea Salt. he had these big long greenhouses. He had seawater in there, and he was making sea salt. And I was like, oh heck, I know how to build that. And let's try building one. So this was 2012, and 2012 was supposed to be the end of the year, end of the world. I don't know if y'all remember that superstition. And I think sometimes it's useful to treat fiction as fact. Like some fiction, it's worth treating as fact. So it's like, okay, imagine the world is going to end. What do you want to do? And so I did. I tried to embody that a little bit. Like I traveled to Europe. I went skydiving, and one of the things I did was like, okay, we're gonna build a salt greenhouse just for fun. Like, well, let's try it out. If we don't have to save any money, let's blow our money and build a salt greenhouse and try it out. And so we got one batch of seawater in that year, and it made 250 pounds of salt. Like, whoa, here's all this salt all of a sudden. And we say, okay, we kind of have a business here maybe. And so we took it down to the University District Farmers Market in Seattle, and here they are. People came and bought it. I mean, it was the middle of, December, so people were in kind of a crazy mood to try to desperate for gifts, but it was amazing. It was like, okay, people might want to buy this stuff. And from there on out, we just, from 2013, 14, 15 and on, we kept adding more greenhouses, and haven't worked for anybody since then. So, I mean, I'm incredibly grateful for that. But it all started right here with good old Els, as we call him, collecting seawater off South Beach out of that igloo cooler. Now, let's get into the nitty gritty. How actually do we make salt? So for some of y'all, this will probably be, a little bit, you might have seen me talk before. You might have heard me speak to me at the farmer's market. You might have read our website or this, that, or the other. But hopefully some of these pictures at least will be new for you, because it truly is a beautiful process, and we'll get into that a little bit. So simple enough, right? We start with seawater. So I got a lovely gentleman's agreement with a gentleman down near South Beach who's got his own private beach. He lets me back up my big truck to it, and I get to suck up seawater from this beautiful spot. And that's me listening to my headphones while the pump runs. I spend an inordinate amount of time listening to podcasts while I'm loading seawater and unloading seawater, loading seawater and unloading seawater. And then we bring it home. We filter the ever-living crud out of it. And this is my 50-year-old salt truck. We call him Fred. He's got a big old tank on the back there, and we just fill him with seawater, and drains right down into our greenhouses. This is what the greenhouses look like. So basically it's a hoop house. To give you a sense for scale, the ones we build are about 12 feet wide and 100 feet long. And then inside there is the pond. And that's just like basically a food grade pond liner, like you'd have, that's like you'd store municipal water, or like you'd do a koi pond with. We lay it in there. Seawater comes in, gets filtered going in, and that's about 1,500, 1,600 gallons it gets. Then it's just a matter of waiting. As you can see, there's no fans, there's no heaters, there's no electricity, there's no nothing. It's just sunshine. And it's just kind of not unlike farming. You plant the seed and you wait, and hopefully it grows. And here we are. This is the beginning of crystallization. So say it takes about a month on average. And mind you, we're only doing this between April and say late September, because if it's cold out, if it's rainy out, our system doesn't do anything. It just sits there. The salt water just sits there. It might even get more wet because there's humidity in there that it can absorb. But so during the summertime, that is, about say a little over halfway in, the seawater started at around 3% salinity. That's basically the average worldwide, and similar here as well. Then say at about 15 to 20% salinity. So a lot of water's gone, but not nearly all of it. And you start seeing these little crystals start hanging out on the top of the surface here. And they're very, very delicate. The interesting thing here is that's actually not salt. So one thing that people don't always understand is that, they think of salt as sodium chloride, which when you buy it from the store, it is that. It's been chemically refined to be just that. But if you just take seawater and put it in a tide pool, for instance, and let it dry away, there's more than just sodium chloride there. There's all sorts of other minerals. Sodium chloride is the dominant mineral, but there's lots of other things that come in. And actually this stuff here is predominantly chalk. So that's calcium carbonate. That's the most common mineral in the ocean. It spits it out like crazy. That's why we have limestone everywhere, because oceans are constantly precipitating out, which means turning to crystal calcium carbonate. And so if you ran your finger along the surface of the water here and captured some of these hanging, this is hanging, so there's 3 inches of water there, and those crystals are sitting on top, just to make sure we are looking at the same thing. If you picked up some of those crystals and tasted them, they would not be salty. They would taste like chalk. They'd be like, if you accidentally ate some of your kids' chalk. It has almost no flavor. So it's pretty cool. And in industrial salt production, they would let those calcium carbonate crystals remove themselves completely, kind of exhaust their supply before moving this water to another pond where the sodium chloride would then start. Because the thing about minerals is they come out in very orderly sequence just based on their chemical properties. So you have calcium carbonate first, you have maybe calcium sulfate next, then you start to see a little bit of sodium chloride, and you know that's in the band of like by 25% salinity, and it gets more and more salty, more and more salty. So anyway, what I'm saying is because of the fact that the minerals come out in an orderly fashion, and that's just based on chemistry, and again, I'm not great at chemistry, so don't test me. You were able, if you want to, you can segregate out those different minerals, and you can make it so that you only harvest just that real pure sodium chloride, and that is how industrial sea salt is made. They're separating these ponds out, and so they're only harvesting that one window. But what I like to call it Stone Age salt production, the way we do it, we just let it all in. It's all going in. So this calcium carbonate is hanging on top there. It's going to go into our salt. It's part of our sea salt. It adds to the flavor. It adds to just the interestingness of it. And in general, I like systems that are very simple. So this is as simple as they get. You put water in there, and then when it's all gone, all the water's gone, you harvest it. But here, we'll keep going on the pictures here. So this, I love some of these pictures, and you're gonna have to really look close at your screen to see what's happening here. So we're looking at the surface of the water, and what happens, these are starting to be some sodium chloride crystals, and most sodium chloride crystals will naturally form a pyramid shape, an inverted pyramid shape on the water. So what you're seeing here are actually the divots from the pyramids themselves. So in the top left corner, you can see some rather large divots, and then kind of coming down and across, you're seeing really baby divots. So what happens is it's kind of counterintuitive. You wouldn't think that the crystals are forming on the surface of the water. You'd think that it would be forming on the bottom, but it's not the case. They form on the top, and then they start to grow outward, connecting to other salty spots on the surface of that water. And then but the middle part gets heavy, so it sinks down. And then so what you're having is basically a square growing out and then a pointy part going down. That's an inverted pyramid. And so that's what you're seeing in these images is lots and lots and lots and lots of baby crystals that are forming inverted pyramids, and they will eventually sink. I mean, they can't hold themselves up forever, but that's surface tension holding these pyramidal crystals up, and then they will join together in all sorts of crazy ways, but they all kind of start as this. And I mean, it's just stuff like this that it just gives me no end of joy and wonder just to watch these beautiful kind of landscapes form in our salt ponds. And here's another even closer version of that. So basically, almost at this point, the whole surface has kind of been formed into a conglomeration of these upside down pyramids. And you know, it's got this photo's not great because it's got a little bit of shine here. But if you look more towards the top, it's just like this landscape. And this is all floating. This is all still on, you know, about 2 inches of water. And you can see over in the top left, you can kind of see a little bit of the classic pyramidal shape there dropping down. And if you've ever bought fancy flake salt, you know, there's a lot of fancy flake salt providers in the world, and almost you can get it so that almost all of them are those perfect pyramids. And that's, you know, it's its own deal. And we'll go a little bit into our flake salt, which is a little bit different. But so there are ways you can harvest just for this and make your production system just for this, but it's very difficult to do with solar power. With solar evaporation like we do, it's just so much less controlled. We don't control the temperature. I mean, the water will get up to, you know, 85 degrees during the day, and then it'll drop down to 50, and it'll be 110 degrees in there with 0% humidity during the day, and it'll be 40 degrees in there at night with, you know, 90% humidity. That kind of fluctuation means we have way less control over it. So the fun thing about that is you get a lot more variation. So as those pyramids start to sink and then they grow on each other, they connect to each other, what they start doing is they form into cubes, but large cubes that are like stacked on each other. So they're not like perfect little singular cubes like the idea we get from Morton salt, like, microscopic, very even, you know, cubes. That's not really what the deal is. You get these. I mean, it kind of looks like an X-ray machine, right? But this is not an X-ray machine. This is real life. This is what they look like. And this is, again, still with water here. These are not dry. This is still water underneath there. And you can see what we're looking at, these little squares that look like they have X's on them. That's kind of looking from straight down onto a pyramid. So that the center of that X would be the pointy part of the pyramid, which is pointing down into the water. And those will then grow into these larger things, which is just like stacks and iterations and turns of cubes, interacting with each other, but turning their facets. So it doesn't just grow out into a perfect cube. It has all sorts of changes, twists and turns it makes. And just absolutely incredible. So then as it's getting lower and lower, it's basically the water goes away and we're left with this, kind of like a slushy snow, like a slurry almost in a way. It's not perfectly dry. We harvest it before it gets perfectly dry. It would just take forever to get perfectly dry. Yes, slushy snow, exactly. So we'll then scoop that up and put it in 5-gallon buckets to drain. So, it will get drier. But the key point of what I wanted to talk about was bringing it back to the minerals. So like I said, there's an orderly progression of minerals that come out in a brine. We started with the calcium carbonate or chalk and some other ones, and then we get to the sodium chloride, and that's what we experience as salty. But there are still minerals that really don't want to be made into crystals. That's just based on the chemical properties. They want to stay in solution. They want to stay in the liquid. And that's what the salt maker would call bittern or nagari, the Japanese call it. So it's this very thick, viscous fluid that will drain off of harvested sea salt. But if you taste it, it doesn't taste like seawater anymore. If you taste it, it's not salty. It's actually bitter. And that's because it's highly concentrated with magnesium, magnesium chloride, some other magnesium minerals. And those minerals are not salty. They're bitter. So that's why they call it bittern. But again, there's going to be some of that in there. And that's what makes our salt taste a little bit more briny. Sea salt all kind of tastes roughly the same, but ours does taste maybe like 5 or 10% more wild, a little bit more briny, a little more oceany than store-bought sea salt. It's because we let a lot more of that bittern in. Some does drain off in our process, but we let a lot more in. And anyway, by the time we're ready to harvest, it's just pure snowy white crystals. There's a number more steps beyond that because it's still very large. We're talking about big crystals, and we're talking about all sorts of sizes of crystals, and it's quite wet still. But a day like this, you can see me there. It's probably about 105, 110 degrees inside that greenhouse. And that salt itself is probably about 95, 100 degrees. It's hot, wet salt. And we're hauling about 250 pounds out of each greenhouse. We have about 7 greenhouses right now. So that's what I'm talking about. It kind of feels like farming and feels like really good, healthy, backbreaking work. But yeah, then to kind of round it out, how do we get from there to here, which is our jar of sea salt? We dry it a little bit more in our kitchen. We sift it to separate the different sizes of crystals. So we have like grinder salt, we have flake salt, we have our fine salt, which we call natural salt, and that's what's in this jar. We have pretzel-like salt, which goes into our bath salt. So separating those out, we grind it, dry it, sift it. So it's basically just a matter of kind of manipulating it to get our different grades of salt out. But it's no more evaporation. So, that whole process from getting from pure water to basically pure salt was just sunshine. There was no heat, no nothing. And that really does make us unique around here because most artisan sea salt in the world is made by boiling seawater. And like I talked about at the beginning, that's just really energy intensive, really messy. It can take up to 2 pounds of liquid fossil fuels to make 1 pound of sea salt if you boil it. So, from the beginning, we kind of fell into this solar thing because that's what we knew how to do was build greenhouses. But at this point in our world, where our world is at, we just don't need to be burning propane to make fancy sea salt. So we're going to stick with the way we got it. And of course, from there, we don't just stick with our sea salt. One of the funnest parts about this business is, coming up with some flavors because people eat salt, but really what they eat is seasonings. And so this is kind of just even a small portion of the seasonings we offer. We've come up with about 30 or 40 different flavors and products, everything from grinders that are mixed with salt and pepper to salted honey caramels to we got kimchi salt here. We have smoked salt. We have taco seasoning. We have popcorn seasoning, which is our best seller by far. We have our flake salt up there, which is, again, some of those beautiful, light, delicate pyramid pieces and other light, delicate pieces that broke off of pyramids that we were able to extract out. That's our flake salt. And so this has kind of become the bigger part of our business is all these other flavors that we bring out from our core single product there with, we try to buy good organic herbs and find interesting ways to combine them. And that kind of keeps us all going because it's, it would kind of be a little bit intellectually deadening just to try to sell 10 million units of salt. Instead, we get to sell, X many units of salt, but then come up with 30 new flavors. And that's really fun. And my team is just wonderful at that because A, I'm not a very good cook, and B, I'm not very detail oriented. So everybody else on my team is kind of the opposite of me, so it works out pretty well. Now, kind of where are we going with all this? So this is kind of a bland looking picture, but in the background there you can see our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 current greenhouses, each one of those filled with salt right now. And right now we're in the heart of our season. So, we're trying to turn over beds as quick as we can harvest them. We harvest them and go get more seawater, put some more in, and it only takes about 3 or 4 weeks. So yeah, we're just we're at the point now where we took that big loan and intending to double our production this year. And then of course, a month later, we're in the middle of, a globally historic pandemic. So kind of everything got shut down, but by hook or by crook, our business has kind of kept going. And we're just endlessly thankful for that. And we've gotten enough optimism to the point where now, okay, we're going to try to start building these greenhouses again so that next year we can maybe get ahead of the salt curve and have enough to be a little bit more creative and try to reach out to more customers. So this space you see in front of us, by next year, should be filled with 7 more greenhouses and hopefully all salting away. But that's the short term. In the long term, really what we're looking for is, imagine the Westcott Bay. You guys go out there to the oyster place and you sit in a beautiful spot, you sip wine, you snack on the oysters that they make right there, you meet with friends. That's our dream, but for sea salt. So you go to Salmon Island Sea Salt, you get a tour of how we make sea salt, you see something you never seen before, you learn something, you taste something, we have some fun snacks, of course you shop on all our stuff, you sit and drink some wine with some friends in a beautiful spot. That's our long-term dream. Obviously, land on the island is very difficult to come by and find the right piece of land, and let alone zoning and all the rest. But, at the end of the day, what we're trying to get to is sharing this, because we're not open to the public right now. So most people don't get to see all these pictures I've shown you of the crystals. And to me, like I said, it brings me so much wonder and joy. And so I really want to try to find a way that we can share that with more people. And that's going to become a destination, but we're not there yet. So for now, we're just going to keep making more salt. Now, what have I learned? Boyd, how far am I? What time is it?
You're doing great. You've got another 15 more minutes if you want.
Perfect. Great. Love it. What have I learned? What's the point of a business? So these are going to kind of become, a little bit disjointed here, but point of a business. It's not what I've come to see business as is basically you're trying to throw a party. You're trying to throw a party that's in a theme that you like, and invited to this party are your employees, your vendors, your customers, you're the people in the community that support you. And so, you're trying to make it fun, like in a way it's somehow sustainable, a long-term party that people can stay at for a really long time and they want to be a part of, and they want to invite their friends to this party. But the party should be on your theme. So if you're kind of geeky, the party should be a little geeky. And if you're kind of into science, the party should be a little bit sciencey. And, if you're into beauty, the party should be a little bit about beauty. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of an odd thing, but to me, business is trying to come up with a theme for a party that people want to come to and keep coming back to. Why do owners make more money than workers? I think this is a question that our society is struggling with. Maybe not in that directly of a terms, but this is the idea of inequality is, to me, it comes down to a lot down to the fact that owners of businesses make a lot more than employees of businesses. And something I struggle with, because when you start a business and you're employing, say, your brother and your family and your friends, like, how do you know what to pay them? How do you know what to pay yourself? It's not easy to figure this out. I don't really have any firm answers. The one insight that I have had, which is, we all know that in general, owners of businesses make more than employees, but you have to think about all the failures that led up to that, all the failed businesses and the failed owners you don't see being owners anymore. So in a sense, it's a payment for risk taken. Not to say that workers don't take risks, but in general, owners take more risks. So if you're really going to draw that out into the biggest lesson you can, it's that there's something about owners seem to be taking more of a risk, putting aside, sacrificing more of the present for the future. And often that doesn't pay off. It pays off really poorly. But the people that make really, do really well as owners in businesses, and I'm not necessarily one of those, but are somehow able to truly make a good relationship between their present self and their future self. And that sacrifice is where because as a worker, I'm kind of losing my train of thought. So some of these are still just open questions for me. But that is what it is. is small business better than big business? Yeah, basically it's not. Small business is not better than big business for a number of reasons, but they pay their employees less. They're harder on the environment. There's less benefits to work there. There's a number of things, and I have a small business, so I love small businesses. But yeah, it's kind of been a hard-won realization that we shouldn't be so inherently skeptical of big businesses. In general, they're better on their workers and the environment than small businesses. So anyway, spreadsheets are amazing. I live for spreadsheets. I think every high school student should have to make spreadsheets. That should be the end goal of their mathematical education in high school, is to make spreadsheets, because all you need is, the basic, things. You don't need square roots. All you need is like averages, addition, subtraction, all the rest. And you can do so much with spreadsheets. You can really look into your life and see what's going on with it. Look into the future and see what should I be doing with my money, with my time. And I think everybody should graduate high school with a really firm sense of how to make a good spreadsheet. That's my pitch. Yeah, I've learned that owning a small business is basically you're constantly confronting your ignorance, because you know so little. Like, I didn't go to business school. I don't know how to do anything. So everything is a challenge. I mean, it's become easier over 9 years in some ways, but you're constantly having your ignorance shoved in your face, and it can be exhausting. But I think it's basically, that's what a meaningful life is having some kind of healthy relationship with your ignorance. And boy, running a small business will give you plenty of that. In another sense, owning a small business is like having a mirror. It constantly displays your weaknesses. So yeah, if you want to see your weaknesses and see your ignorance, but see that in a healthy way, owning a small business is a great way to do it. Podcasts are amazing. They are unbelievable richness, because when I first started this business, it was just me. And so I spent countless hours working by myself. And yeah, podcasts are one of the greatest gifts that modern man has. Our phones are kind of these traps of addiction and suffering, but podcasts are not one of those traps. Things that still puzzle me. Love looking at crystals. There I am. So what makes crystals grow in the ways that they do at those different times and places? Like, I've shown you pictures of all these different formations that they have. What makes them do that? I really don't know. We have only the faintest idea. I mean, I would love to have a chemist out or somebody who studies crystals to tell me more, but I really am not clear. How much risk should I be taking in my business and life? Very unclear. Like, should I be plowing every single cent I have into this thing, and in the hopes of really growing it to be something much bigger? Or is some kind of hedging my bets more the wise route? Unclear. I think it's something I'm constantly wrestling with, because I think in a business you can certainly take too much risk, but you can also take too little risk. And I think I'm trying to wrestle with where we're at, whether we're on that spectrum. How can we more consistently make a salt that rivals the world's best? But I'm very humble about that. Our salt is not up there with the world's best yet. For a number of reasons that kind of like only a salt farmer would care about, but we're not there yet. And so we're constantly struggling with how can we moderate the environment in those greenhouses, not by adding artificial heat or fans, but how can we moderate the environment to more consistently produce the perfect crystals that we love? They're just the right size and shape. Unclear. How can I make more of a positive impact on the world? Boy, it's running a small business basically takes everything you want, everything you have, takes it all out of you. So it's unclear. I think at this point, it's trying to be better at business so I can pay my employees a little more and I can set aside more money for my kids. Beyond that, it's hard to imagine how I can change the world as a salt farmer, but I know I can make the world a better place by doing those two things. And yeah, I think the biggest one that being a business owner really forces me to grapple with is the relationship between the present and the future. Yeah, it's this idea like, what's a positive sum interaction with our future self look like? And in business, like, should I spend $100,000 to build these greenhouses and not have the $100,000 now, but maybe with 15 years from now, I will be much better off. Yeah, I think it's just something constantly wrestling with. It's similar to the idea of risk, but how do you come to terms with your future self? And maybe it's future selves, but there's a lot more future than there is the present. Yeah, and I think it's great. I think that's the wonderful thing about a small business is it really forces you to grapple that, which I think is one of the key questions of humanity, is the relationship between our present self and our future selves. And here's just a few fun pictures. No talking. Crystals are cool. These are all from within our salt ponds. I mean, this one kind of reminds me of Antarctica. Love the landscapes that form. And this one, I mean, look at this. It's just, there's just so many different ways it forms. Endlessly interesting. You can stare at it like for hours, just staring at this, trying to understand, not even understand it, just to be in awe of it, really. This is actually a crystal of Nagari. I think I mentioned it, maybe I had cut out, but the fluid that drains off of our salt is not very salty. It's actually quite bittern. It's actually quite bitter. It's called bittern, and it's very heavily concentrated with magnesium. And this is a crystal of that. It forms these kind of classic spear-shaped. What shape is that? I don't know. Pentagon, hexagon. And you taste that crystal. It is not salty, not in the least. It's pure bitter. It's purely bitter. So one of the amazing crystals that forms in our greenhouses that has nothing to do with actual salt. Here's that one. I think I might have showed you this one at the beginning. Yeah, this is one of my favorite photos of our ponds of all time. All these hanging chandeliers. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Here's Mount Rainier. No, not Mount Rainier, some mountain. This is a piece of flaky sea salt that we pulled out of our greenhouse. Look at this. It's like a lost city. Crumbling Mayan ruins here. Completely unnatural. We didn't do anything to make that form. It just happens. These are some more of these bittern crystals in a slightly different form. These are like needle-like. It's like hoarfrost almost. They form on the ground underneath the buckets as they're draining away that bittern, the harvested salt. And again, you taste that. Not salty. It is not salty. It's pure bitter. So absolutely fascinating. Little island. And this one, just this cute little translucent cube on cube on cube. You can see how it started as a pyramid. And what happened is the pyramid just kind of built out around itself. So it wasn't pointy anymore. It became this blunt little pyramid. I just love that little crystal. Such a cute one. There are our greenhouses in a lovely San Juan Valley evening light. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brady. I really appreciate it. We actually have some questions already in the chat box, and if I can get at it, yes. Hang on one sec.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there are several comments. In particular, Salt Tour sounds great. Is the property yours?
The property is on now is not. It's my parents' property. So yeah, we're not open to the public. If somebody twists my arm enough, I give them a tour, and I've given a tour to some student groups before, but we're not open to the public now. So that's the dream, is to get our own spot where we can be open to the public and people can come and I just want to knock their socks off, showing them these things. So yeah, that's the dream.
Right. There's how do you keep algae and bacteria from growing in the greenhouses?
Wonderful question. So, as the seawater comes in, we're filtering it very heavily. Every once in a while, some microscopic plankton do get in, because you can see a little bit of a greenish hue on the surface for a second. But what happens is they don't like it salty. So they might exist there for the first 4 or 5 days, but very quickly it gets too salty for them and it kills it off. And so by halfway through, when the salt has increased from 3% to say 20%, there's nothing living in there, and it just comes out snowy, perfect white every single time.
Right. How much time do you spend on building your social media presence? I've told you before that yours is an excellent example because you are so authentic and share such great personal things. This is from Sarah Joy.
Let's see. It's become more and more vital to our business as time's gone on, because one thing that's happened with coronavirus is that we stopped doing the farmers markets out of an abundance of caution for our employees, and a lot of our wholesale people kind of slowed way down. And so we really were relying on our online sales. And if you're selling things online, social media that's where it's at. I mean, basically Instagram is just free advertising. If you can tell a story well and tell a story in an interesting way with interesting pictures, people are coming to you to be advertised too. So it's an amazing gift. But it's not much. My wife has taught me everything I know about using Instagram and social media, and she's just really, really good at it. And it's the key thing is having lots of interesting pictures. You got to start there, and so that's where the work is having lots of interesting pictures. But maybe we're spending half hour a day on it or something. It's relatively minor. It's once you have a backlog of interesting pictures and interesting uses of food or whatever, then it's just, putting a picture up there and then saying something that makes sense to you. You're authentic in the moment. So, yeah.
Great. So another question, how do you dispose of the bittern magnesium waste? Do you sell it to another company? Wikipedia says it can be used as a coagulant both in the production of tofu and in the treatment of industrial wastewater.
I knew the tofu one. I did not know the wastewater one. So we started out selling it. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, it's called bittern or nagari. We called it nagari. I just like that word better because it's a Japanese word. Basically, it means the same thing. And so the way we do it now, we just let it go away. So we put our salt in 5-gallon buckets. There's holes drilled in them, so they're just draining that stuff away. But when we first started, we would capture it, filter it, and sell bottles of it because you can't use it as a coagulant to make tofu, and we've done that before. I don't love tofu enough to spend that much time on it because it is, it's a bit of a process. But yeah, so we don't sell it to anybody. We just let it go to waste. The thing is, if we just let those build up in our salt, if we for instance, if we drained our buckets over our salt ponds, which that kind of makes sense. You don't want to lose any salt, right? That bitter chemicals, the magnesium, would build up more and more, so our salt would.
I think we got cut out on the last part of that thing, but I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next one. So this is a great one. Where can we buy the salt on the island?
Where can we buy it? Oh boy, where can you not buy it is really the better question. So like I said, we're not doing the farmer's market this year out of an abundance of caution, but certainly King's, Marketplace, Co-op, Gourmet Galley, Road Charter Market. We do free shipping now on our website. That was a big move for us. You don't think that businesses our size can do free shipping, but it kind of felt like a Hail Mary in March because we didn't know where our business was going to do. So we do now offer free shipping. So there's items that you see on our site that local stores aren't carrying, then you can order on our site and you can still get it for free.
Right. The question, have you tested the natural iodine content of the salt?
That's a good question. We've tested the mineral spectrum of our salt. The thing is, iodine is so incredibly trace in natural sea salt. I think I had to buy a different test to get at that. It's like they'll tell you like the calcium and the magnesium and the sodium and everything, but then iodine is just like an incredibly trace element of natural sea salt. So yeah, I don't know about it. What I do know is it's not enough. Like if we didn't have, the thing about iodine that maybe people know, maybe they don't, is that it naturally occurs in most soils. Most agricultural soils have enough iodine, but not all. So there's some soils that if you were to eat the food, vegetables and everything else grown on that region, you become iodine deficient. But a lot of soils that we grow food in have plenty of iodine. But regardless, we kind of have covered, we've solved that problem by adding iodine to our major, our major salt manufacturers all iodize their salt. So it's kind of taking care of us on that level regardless, and evened out these natural variations that happen in the soil, iodine content in the soil. So yeah, long story short, I've never tested it. I know it's not enough. If you need iodine in your diet and you're deficient, our sea salt will not do the trick.
Okay. What about the concern about pollutants in the ocean? Do you feel there's something to worry about for your salt? Yeah,
absolutely. It's something to worry about. It's a two-pronged process. Well, three-pronged really. The first prong is we filter the ever-living crud out of it, like I said, and we're always looking for new ways to do that. And one way we've been looking at is actually utilizing desalination plants. Because one thing desalination plants do, and there's a number of them here on the island, is they make fresh water, but they also make twice as salty brine water, and they put that back in the ocean. That's just waste, effluent for them. But in that process, they filter everything out of the seawater. And there's actually a business up in BC that uses a desal system to start their process, to get their water filtered and to get the salt water just a little bit saltier. So we've been talking to a few different desal plants on the island about maybe getting brine, which would provide us with much cleaner than we could ever get. Basically, it's as clean as brine could get. In addition, of course, we test our salt to make sure it's safe. But at the end of the day, the thing about humans is we've just done an amazing job of spreading our chemicals throughout the oceans and throughout the earth. And, it's going to be kind of like eating a salmon. Like the salmon does not swim in prehistoric waters where there's no pollutants. It swims in the water of current day where there are some pollutants. As long as it's it's going to be safe, but it's not going to be non-existent, because that's what we've done to the world. When we eat crabs from around here, we eat oysters and we eat clams and we eat salmon and seaweed and all the rest. It's we're eating a little bit of ourselves, and I think that's in a sense that's just karma. We've done this to the earth and we get to eat it. So
Okay. There's a very specific question. Are there any local tofu makers you could sell the bitterns to?
yeah, there folks over on Bainbridge Island. It's called Spring. I can't remember the name of it, but they've been around forever, from like the 70s, and they make tofu. They use there's like a more industrially available coagulant they use. There's a number of different coagulants you can use for tofu, but they reached out. But the consistency of the product is key for them. Like they need to make sure that there's no sodium chloride in it, because they're not trying to make their tofu more salty. It's just pure magnesium chloride. And that, in along with the batch size, or the amount we could give them, meant that it wasn't really feasible.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a weird one. James Clerk Maxwell, who you probably know from electromagnetism, wrote an essay in which he thought thinking was crystallization. Do you think like salt, Brady?
That's it. I think it's a decently apt metaphor, because there seem to be two modes of thinking that I can inhabit. One is like really directed, like I need to figure out how to manipulate the spreadsheet, and like, okay, you're doing some kind of mental math, like moving it around. It's very intentional and directed. And the other one is more, as we all experience, things pop into your head. You don't know where they come from. Who brought those ideas to you? Was it your subconscious? Was it something else? And, that's kind of the way it is with seawater. It's like, it's just, there's nothing there. And then all of a sudden, what'll happen with our seawater ponds, where you come in the morning, it's like halfway through a batch, you come in the morning, there's nothing. And then you come back, and then the surface is just covered in all these tiny little crystals. And it came out of nowhere. I mean, in the course of 2 hours. And then they start to grow on each other and connect with each other. So I think there is a decent metaphor there. Because they seem to come from nowhere. Then once they're there, they seem to combine in unlikely ways. And I've never thought about that, but I think there's something there. Decent metaphor.
Great. Very specific question. The first picture you showed of yourself in the water holding a handful of salt was an excellent photograph. Was it made by a local photographer?
Oh yeah. We've used a lot of photographers, but that one and all the ones we've done lately, professional photography, that is La Vie Photography. It's Kim and Adam Bamberg. Kim is a local. She grew up here as well, and they just moved here with their 2 kids, and they do wedding photography. So that's kind of out the window this year, but they're top notch. We use them all the time. So it's La Vie Photography.
Right. So are there any other questions? I don't see any hands raised, and I'm not seeing any more in the group chat.
Can I ask one?
Yes.
Thank you. Brady, can you hear me? This is Louisa.
I can hear you loud and clear, Louisa.
Good. Thanks so much. It was a really great talk. I really enjoyed it. And I just was curious. So how much of your time, or like what proportion of employee hours is spent on the actual salt making process? And then following on from that, for you as a business owner, how do you figure out how to spend your time? Because you probably have a lot of things you could do and you can't do them all.
Yes.
So I was curious how you make those decisions.
Wonderful question. So the first question is what proportion of my employees and my time is going to actual salt production versus all the other things? And it's actually relatively minor, because the process that we use is a solar process. It's extremely hands-off. I mean, even more hands-off than farming. Because farming, you still have to water your crops, you still have to weed your crops, you still have to maybe apply pesticides or whatever. But once the seawater goes,
Brady, we've lost your audio. You're fuzzy and not coming through.
Okay, we're gonna spin in a circle, see if it helps. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Sort of.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yep. Something's coming in and out. So yeah, it's a relatively minor amount because the process is so hands off, and it's kind of fun. It's always a fun. It's fun. We're like, oh, it's harvest time, and we get excited about that. And then we go in there, and like I said, it's 110 degrees, and we're hauling out 250 pounds of molten hot salt in a greenhouse that was built not for humans but for salt. And we quickly become disabused of that notion, and we're like, okay, we're happy to wait another month. But the second question, I think, is the more important question is, you know, in a small business, basically there's an infinite amount of things you should be doing in any given moment, functionally infinite. And how do you decide how to spend your time? I mean, the first answer is that I don't. I just respond to whatever is stressing me out the most, which is not a good way to do things. It's just very stimuli oriented. Like, this thing is stressing me out, or that email came in and that stresses me out. I'm going to respond to that. I'm responding to what is stressing me out the most or what's easiest. It's like, okay, I can get this small order out right now. And it's going to provide me a little bit of a dopamine hit and feel like I did something. So yeah, at my worst, I'm purely responding towards stress and dopamine. At my best, how am I deciding what to do? We've been so shorthanded this year because of coronavirus, and just like our team kind of got messed up because we felt like we had to lay people off because sales were really dropping fast, but then sales came back faster than expected, so we were shorthanded. So I've had to basically be hands-on doing all the regular salt, like jarring and labeling and all that kind of stuff that I probably shouldn't be doing. I should be really doing higher value stuff, aiming our business somewhere towards the future. So as we're coming out of that, I think the simple question is, I should be asking is, how am I preparing our business for what it could be? How am I aiming our business at where it can be and where we could be, instead of like, what does the business need this second? And so it's just, you know, my role as a leader really needs to be the vision, like seeing something coming and aiming us at that, some larger vision of what we can be. So yeah, I think there's a realistic answer and then an answer that I really am trying to occupy every once in a while.
Thanks. That sounds familiar.
Yes. Anybody who owns a business knows that. Yeah.
Are there any more questions? I noticed somebody was saying that there was another tofu question, but I couldn't find it. I thought all the tofu questions were answered. So
it's enough about tofu.
All right. I guess that question was, are there any local tofu makers? But you referred to the person on Bainbridge, is that correct?
Bainbridge, yeah, I believe so, yeah. I can't remember the names. You'll find them, yeah.
Okay. Okay, I don't see any more. So Brady, I want to thank you so much for doing this. This was wonderful. And I do want to say that this was recorded, and we will hopefully go in and pick up some of those gaps and go ahead and merge them, splice them, I should say. And it will be on the library website within a week or so. So
if we can do it
Brady,
again next year in person, it'll be easier.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this, Brady.
It was truly an honor. Thank you guys so much for spending time with me tonight. I really appreciate getting a chance to talk about salt. So thank you.